Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our 10th week of Tuesday interviews. Honestly, when we started, I thought it was going to be like 2 or 3 weeks, and we're at week 10, so it's pretty exciting. We're here on Ontario Wrestling Instagram Live, and this is a weekly interview segment where we talk to some of Canada's best wrestlers. Our hope is to share what some of Canada's senior level wrestlers are doing during a time of a global pandemic and to encourage athletes on all levels of their journey. So my name is Emily Ling. I'll be your host for the night. For those of you that don't know me, I'm currently the development coach at the Hamilton Wrestling Club. I wrestled for 10 years, primarily at Brock University, before retiring after the 2019 Canadian Olympic Trials. I actually had the privilege of going on a couple international trips with tonight's guest. So during the course of this interview, please feel free to comment your questions, and if we have time at the end, we will definitely be getting to those questions. So want to make it as interactive as possible. Tonight's guest, as you can see, is Stephen Takahashi. He was a Commonwealth Games silver medalist, a Pan American Games medalist, a World University medalist, a Francophone Games gold medalist, a national champion in Greco and freestyle at all age groups. He is currently the chair of the Athletes Council for Wrestling Canada, and he is the male athlete rep for the High Performance Advisory Committee with Wrestling Canada. And he also is the assistant coach with the Varsity Wrestling team. That is quite a list.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to see like how you were a highly accomplished wrestler up until very recently, including very recently, and to see you now moving into these roles of leadership and coaching is pretty awesome to see, and something that I hope a lot of athletes coming out of their careers can get involved with. So we're excited to hear a little bit more about your story tonight. Yeah,
of course.
So how old were you when you first got involved with wrestling, and how did you first get involved?
Well, it's a long story with my wrestling career. You know, I've always been around the sport because my dad, he was, you know, a 3-time Olympian and the head coach at Western University. So growing up, I've always been around the sport constantly. But I actually started with judo because my family actually has a good lineage of judokas, and we have our own dojos. And so I started there, and then just over time been around wrestling so much that I kind of just got into it. But I think my first wrestling match was, I think I was in grade 3, and then I was more heavily involved in other sports. My dad never kind of pushed me into wrestling. It was just, I'm around it so much, so I kind of did it. And then it wasn't until I was about grade 7, grade 8, where I kind of dove in full and tried to focus all my energy trying to make the Olympics in wrestling.
So, Stephen, you're not only a highly accomplished wrestler yourself, but you come from a line of, like you mentioned, highly successful athletes, your dad being one of them. He was an Olympian. Previously to him, even down the line, I guess, is very high-level athletes. So could you talk about what it means to come from such a successful athletic family?
Yeah, well, you know, sport's always been a big part of my life, right? With my mom and my dad's a 3-time Olympian. My mom's a world champion in running. So sport is just the way I grew up. And, you know, my sister was a runner. She followed my mom's footsteps, and then I kind of followed my dad's footsteps going into wrestling. Yeah. And going past that, the Takahashi side, we were all judokas. And looking at just some of their results, you know, I'm the only person in my family that doesn't have his black belt. And my grandma just reminded me that, you know, I got to get on that now that I'm done wrestling. So it's been an honor to, you know, continue that line going forward and going with wrestling. My dad kind of stepped away from judo and went more into wrestling, and I kind of followed his footsteps. But it's nice to go back to our grassroots and partake in some martial arts as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's really cool that you can still come from like a line of athletic families. And I've read a little bit about your story of how your dad never really pressured you into wrestling, but kind of allowed you to find your own path, and that you end up kind of in the same place and being one of his athletes is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. You know, I had such a great wrestling career, and being able to follow my dad's footsteps was, you know, really special. But really following my whole family, it's been really nice. My uncle, you know, he was considered the best judoka, you know, in Canada, and that's why my dad went into wrestling. He could never beat my uncle, and he actually just passed away last week. So I was just looking at some of his results this past weekend, just because of the circumstances, and it's like, you know, it's an honor to just like be a part of that family, someone that good and technically good, and to follow those footsteps. It's been really nice. And then, you know, past my wrestling career, I retired and then immediately started helping coach, you know, my cousin, and my cousin won the Olympic trials for Greco and was taking my place in that weight class. So, you know, it was a real honor to kind of keep that tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. What were some of your favorite moments in your personal wrestling career?
You know, there's so many good favorite moments. Some that come to mind, you know, winning my first world medal at the university University World Championships was definitely a highlight. That world stage, that was pretty special. One of the biggest matches or biggest wins that I had was I was actually wrestling in Greco, which I trained primarily, or I didn't at the time, but I was trying to qualify for the Olympics, and I had the American in the quarterfinals, who was a clear favorite, and me, who's a big underdog, and knowing that I only had one to qualify for the Olympics, that was, you know, one of the biggest matches of my career for sure. Unfortunately, my next match I lost, which you know, was my Olympic ticket, but that satisfaction, knowing that you can be the underdog and get those results if you really want them, that was just one of the best moments. Then there's also like the other ones, like Commonwealth Games. That's one of my favorite trips of all time. You know, I came second at that tournament. My dad was second at the Commonwealth Games in the same city 30 years prior. So having that like connection, that was really special. And then, you know, just traveling in general. You know, I've been to 48 countries or around 50 countries now, and wrestling has made that happen, right? And so, you know, over that whole wrestling career, favorite moments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I'd agree with that. There's so many times that wrestling just gives you an opportunity to explore the world, and I was on that trip as well to Australia, and it's pretty cool just to be on the total opposite side of the world and still get to experience that. So I think we were just talking about some of our favorite moments in our careers, and for both of us, it kind of seemed that it's kind of like a lot of it is the wrestling moments, a lot of those things, but what stands out really is the opportunity to get to see so many different parts of the world. And we were both on that trip to Australia. It's pretty sweet there, and Canada came out with a lot of medals, so that was exciting as well. And all right, so moving on to our next question.
Yeah.
Who would you say has had the biggest impact on your wrestling career, and why?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I think you just cut out there for a second.
Sure. Who was your biggest impact? Who had the biggest impact on your wrestling career, and why?
Yeah. So obviously, my dad is without a doubt the biggest impact on my wrestling career. You know, he's been my coach since day one. That's been beside me every step of the way. He's the one that got me into wrestling, and you know, going into university and going to his program, and then following his footsteps, and then eventually coaching beside. You know, he's definitely that one that's been the closest to me, and then has also really done everything for my wrestling career. I try to model my wrestling after his style too. So, you know,
I love that. So currently, with your involvement, you touched on it a little bit with wrestling, is you've been able to step into some positions with Wrestling Canada, and also assistant coach with Western.
Yeah. So I'm currently the assistant coach at Western. He's the head coach. And then I also help with the age group program there at London Western Wrestling Club. And then with Wrestling Canada, I act as for the Athlete Council. I'm on the High Performance Advisory Committee with Wrestling Canada. I coach high school now, which I did this season. Took a couple high school teams to OFSA. An amazing experience. And now it's into coaching. So away from that athletic career and now just diving fully into helping out with helping the athletes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And last week our guest was Chris Prickett, who's the assistant coach for the Brock team. So kind of cool that you're the assistant coach for the Western team, and that's the following week. He was talking a bit about how it's kind of a natural transition for wrestlers into coaching, because so often in your career as an active wrestler, you're already starting to take on some of those roles. And so it was nice to be able to move into a coaching role so you could still be involved with the sport. Would you say that that's a similar thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Western, when I graduated, which was in 2015, on an assistant coaching role then, but I was still competing at the time, helping coaching, but also an athlete. And then now that I've retired, it's fully coaching. So the transition has been extremely smooth and progression, right? And then the other thing is my dad was a coach, and I spend the most amount of time with him. So, I've had so much experience with the coaching philosophy and just that notion of like trying to help the athletes. My entire that natural progression was just there and smooth.
Absolutely. So moving on to kind of your role with Wrestling Canada. So currently you are a co-chair for the Athlete Council for Wrestling Canada. When did you first get involved with that role, and why did you start doing that role? Okay, I lied. We're going to try it one more time with going live. We really want to have that interaction with you guys, so allowing you to have a chance to answer, have some questions answered. So we'll try it once more. We think we may have figured out what the problem is, and see if this helps. Hello?
There we go. Technical difficulties are just the worst, right?
Honestly, I think that during this time where everyone's at home on the internet, it just makes it a lot slower in general.
I'm hoping this.
Okay, so we're moving on to talking about being on the Athlete Council for Wrestling Canada. I think this is so huge, like a very important role, and I don't think anyone knows about it. So that's why I really wanted to give you this platform to try to talk a little bit more about it. So let's start with, when did you first get involved with the Athlete Council, and why did you decide to take on that role?
Yeah, so I joined in 2017, I believe. So this is my second term. We do two-year terms, and this is the first term, or the second term, where I'm actually acting as co-chair. Because by helping drive positive athlete-centric change, and I thought I was able to do that by, bringing my ideas forward and to bring that forward to WCL as the athlete's voice. So I thought that was important.
Awesome. And I definitely agree. Definitely so important, and having that athlete voice within this organization is huge. So what exactly is the Athlete Council, and what is its purpose?
Yeah, so the Athlete Council comprises currently of 6 former or current national team athletes, which we were elected at junior senior national championships in 2019. And the council is a board standing committee of WCL. So basically we assist WCL, the board of directors and other committees, in understanding the interests, concerns, perspectives of high performance or national team athletes. So in a nutshell, really what we're doing is we're going over policies and procedures such as the athlete handbook or the athlete agreement for carded athletes, team uniform guidelines, things like that. Mm-hmm. And we bring forward our ideas and our feedback on those policies back to WCL, giving that athlete's voice to them.
Absolutely. So how have things changed with the Athlete Council given the current situation with COVID-19 and the cancellation of numerous events? Have you still been meeting? Have you still been discussing?
Yeah, so actually, since COVID, we've been meeting much more frequently. COVID's actually helped the Athlete Council because, it's been hard normally when you have 6 athletes all across Canada trying to get them on a call for a long period of time, going over policies together. That's in the past been difficult. But since COVID, we have more time because we're not on the mats, and it's been a lot easier to get together over Zoom or go-to meetings. And we've been meeting quite frequently since this all has happened. And we've been giving a lot more feedback into our policies, such as the Athlete Assistance Program agreement, which all carded athletes have to sign. So we'll go over that agreement. We'll go list by list and think of different feedback that we want added or want taken out. And then we'll voice our opinion back to WCL, and they'll respond to that. So that's just some of the policies that we've been going over, but we also look at things like sponsorship or uniform guidelines, what's allowed on singlets, and trying to bring the athlete's voice and fight for the athlete's rights there. Mm-hmm. And really it's about representing the athlete's voice. So even athletes that have a certain issue and they're not getting anywhere with Wrestling Canada, sometimes they'll reach out to us and we can talk to WCL on their behalf. So doing that recently with Javon, and trying to make sure that there's no stone unturned, and really fighting for the athlete's rights. And one of the current topics that we've been talking about recently, actually today, just over text and stuff, has been over the controversy over Rule 50, which is a rule for the Olympic Games where it restricts any kind of protest or demonstration from happening on the field of play at the Olympics, and that includes the podium. Mm-hmm. The idea for that rule is to keep the Olympics a space for truces free from cultural or political or social demonstrations. And the IOC has implemented that rule. And so as athletes and Athlete Council, we will get together or talk about ideas on should that rule be in place, and should we try to fight for the athlete's rights. So we'll be doing little things in the backgrounds, always having the athlete's voice there.
That's so important and valuable, and I think it's cool to see how even current things that have been in the media is something that you as a team have been talking about and discussing for ways to make improvements. So I think you kind of touched, but if an athlete has like something that they see as an issue within the sport or something that they want to ask about, are they able to contact the athlete council and ask those questions?
Of course. Yeah, so it happens not super frequently because a lot of athletes don't know about the athlete council, but we do get athletes to reach out to us, and we'll always do our best in responding to them and further investigating for them. So we'll bring those problems or anything that the athlete wants to say to the WCL board or to the staff of WCL. So that always happens. And then, we also do things like 2 years ago when the Bennett report came out, we thought as a collective whole on the Athletes Council that we needed to act, and that got safe sport running. We wrote a letter to the Minister of Sport, got all the national team athletes to sign it, and we, got a mandate for safe sport, which now is mandated for all sports, not just wrestling. So, these are some of the things that we want to do as Athlete Council. We're a small group, we're still evolving, but we think it's an important role.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with that. At what point can someone get involved with Athlete Council, and how would they go about doing that?
So there's elections every 2 years to be a part of the Athletes Council, which will be coming up in 2021 for the national championships. And if they want to get involved before that, they're always welcome to reach out to us. We have the Athlete Council email on Wrestling Canada's website, and they can always reach out to us, and we'll always include them into anything that we think is necessary. So reach out to us through email. You can find all our information on Wrestling Canada's website. You can reach out to me personally as one of the acting co-chairs. You can reach out to me or Leah Ferguson. She's the other co-chair. And we want athletes involved. It's not like we have this council that's 6 members and that's all we want. We would like more people involved, and if they want to be a part of the conversation, we would welcome that.
Absolutely. Why do you think someone should get involved with Athlete Council, being someone who has been in the role for over 3 years now?
Well, it's really about helping drive that athlete centric change within the organization. And I've always thought that athletes are the biggest stakeholders in the organization. And a lot of times we're not involved with policies. We don't know what's going on. And really, when it comes down to it, the athletes themselves are the most important people within an organization, especially Wrestling Canada. So let your voice be heard and be a part of something that can make a change. So if you want to make that athlete-centric change and put certain ideas into action, then you need to get involved. And I think the Athlete Council is a good way to start.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing so much about the Athlete Council. Thank you myself for educating me a little bit about it. So moving on from there, as a wrestling coach, as a person, what has life looked like for you during this global pandemic?
Well, it's been quite strange. It's so different than what our normal day is. This is the longest I've ever gone for sure in my lifetime without stepping on a wrestling mat. So just, that alone is just so peculiar. For me personally, I'm still able to, work out, do some things. It's been nice for me. It's been relaxing, and it's almost like a good time to, reset and get that motivation back for wrestling, because you're always there. And right now it's been, you're forced into stepping away. I've never taken more than about 2 weeks, I think, off wrestling, and being forced into this has been, a nice little change. And now I'm eager to get back on those mats.
I don't think you're alone in that.
Yeah.
So on that note, what advice would you have for younger athletes, high school athletes that might be struggling with motivation during this time apart, especially when they don't know when things are going to return?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think it's always individual. Every person's a little different, but I think it all comes down to goal setting. I always think that you should set yourself for that long-term goal and then see these short-term goals on how to get there. Um, and really remind yourself of why you want to wrestle. So, you know, for me personally, when I was an athlete, my long-term goal was to win the Olympic gold. And so if I was in this time, I would have that on my mind. Just remind myself, what is my long-term goal? Winning that Olympic gold. It's to win an OFSA championships. You have to set that goal, have that in your mind, and then set those little things that are going to come. For me, it would have been, if I want to win the Olympic gold, I got to get my butt off the couch and get outside and go for a run 3 times a day. Do my own home workout. But you have to have goal setting. Like, it's so important to have that goal and then set those minor goals below it. And I really think that's the way to do it.
Absolutely. I would say on the same kind of track as that, like if you want to reach those long-term goals, it's not going to happen in the 3 months leading up to it. It has to be a lifestyle. And I think for like you, I would say you're pretty probably can look back on your career, and regardless of what your accomplishments were, that day-to-day kind of mindset that you had, the person that you became because of those goals and mindsets was helped you to develop as a person and become who you are today, which is pretty great, I would say.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so I think that was the final set question that we had for tonight. If anyone who's watching, if you have any questions for Steven about Athlete Council, about being an assistant coach, about wrestling, about living with really successful parents in sport, feel free to ask those questions, and we'll get into some rapid fire questions. So I'll start it off. Do you have a favorite hobby other than wrestling?
Ooh, I'm pretty notorious for getting obsessed with hobbies. So, yeah, my current thing right now is rock climbing. Since I've retired from wrestling, I started rock climbing and, going indoors to gyms. And now that gyms are closed, I've been trying to get outdoor and rock climbing. So that's definitely my go-to right now.
Nice. I like it. What's your favorite food?
Oh, that's tough. I don't know. There's so many different things. I'm kind of a foodie. I love to cook. I'm pretty diverse in what I eat. But some of the favorite things that I've had, some A5 Wagyu when I was in Japan. That's kind of first thing that comes to my mind is top food I've ever had.
Nice.
And if you don't know what, that's a really high-end steak, basically.
Oh, I was gonna go look it up after the interview, to be honest. Would you rather be on an elliptical or a treadmill for a weight cut?
Treadmill, always. So for sure, treadmill, I think you can sweat a lot more because you're doing more, you're using more muscle groups. And then just my background in running, my mom was a really good runner. She's won the world championships as a master. My sister was on a full ride to Boston U, so she's a runner. And naturally, I'm probably built more for running than for wrestling, but my genetics for running are there, so it's just always easier for me to cut weight by getting on that treadmill.
True. Red or blue singlets?
Red. Definitely red.
What's your favorite country that you've traveled to?
Oh, there's so many, but I would probably have to say Japan, and my grandma would be very upset at me if I didn't.
Fair point. What's your favorite sport to watch other than wrestling?
my favorite Olympic sport would definitely be gymnastics. I think that's always my go-to sport. I competed in gymnastics as a kid, so that was my actual first Olympic dream, was to be an Olympic gymnast, not wrestler. So yeah, I'd definitely say gymnastics is that number one sport to watch.
They're like crazy in
Yeah.
terms of like athleticism. I just think I'm just like amazed. But that's a good choice. I would I like that choice. Okay, so this is from a question from the audience. If you're down by 2 with 20 seconds left, what's your go-to sequence?
So I think it depends on what I've already done in the match and who I'm wrestling. But almost always I will be looking for, if it's 2 points, I'm looking for a go behind. I find for me, I'm not a big leg attack shooter. I take leg attacks, but I would probably look for a leg attack and then try to snap them down, go behind, and really just put pressure on them. I think putting tons of pressure on someone, forcing them out of bounds, they'll make a mistake and opportunities will open up.
What's your favorite throw?
Shoulder throw, ippon seonagi, for sure.
Do you think, because you have a bit of a background in judo, obviously, and then you've done Greco, do you think those two things have made you more of a thrower when you wrestle?
Yeah, definitely, especially from judo. I definitely have that throwing background from judo, which just made Greco that much easier, I thought. But I didn't get into Greco until after I did freestyle. But Greco for sure helped me tremendously when I went back into freestyle. And I think that a lot more people should be training it or practicing it when they can.
True. From Sam Stewart, what's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome?
Without a doubt, it would be my neck injury. I got injured before the Commonwealth Games, and I wrestled through it, but then I had neck surgery, and then I ended up getting re-injured, which is why I retired. But just getting through that and getting ready for the Commonwealth Games was really the biggest obstacle.
Yeah. And then you still came out with a silver medal, so that's quite impressive. All right. Yeah. Last question I think we have here. Who was your favorite training partner when you were competing?
Yeah. My cousin Adam, he's been, my main training partner for the last couple of years, and I've been training with him for the last couple of years, or the last year while he was training for Greco, trying to make the Olympics. So that's definitely the first person that would come to mind.
So cool that it seems to be such like a family thing for all of you to be athletic, train together, compete together. That's pretty cool. All right. Sam Stewart,
my dad is also one of my favorites, for sure. My dad is always, he was my main training partner, especially for the beginning parts of my career. But his knees have been bad the last couple of years where he hasn't been able to do as much. And that's why I would say Adam for the last recent couple of years.
Fair point. Okay, really the last question. What is the coolest place that you've ever wrestled?
The coolest place I've ever wrestled? I would have to say Times Square. So I was lucky enough to compete at Beat the Streets. It was Team Japan versus the Team USA, and the Japanese in my weight class, he got injured the night before, so they called me up, flew me out the next morning, and I took his spot on the Japanese team, which was just a coincidence. It wasn't because I'm Japanese or half Japanese, but I was able to compete at Beat the Streets in Times Square. My sister lives in New York, so I surprised her coming into New York. So that was definitely probably the coolest place that I've competed. I've been to a lot of different countries, but that was probably the single best place.
That's really cool. And really interesting that you got to be a Team Japan representative for a day. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us. It was great hearing about Athlete Council, great hearing about your coaching career, and obviously always a good time hearing about your wrestling career. So really appreciate you being on here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate you having me, and it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for joining us, for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. I'm glad we were able to get through the interview because I think there were some really cool and important things to have learned from today's interview. So that's it for week 10 of Tuesday interviews. We're hopefully, again, going to be back next week with another interview. Again, if you have someone from the senior national team or senior level coaches that you want interviewed, please send me a message and we will try to make that happen. Again, my name is Emily Ling from the Hamilton Wrestling Club, and I hope everyone has a great night and a happy Canada Day. Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.